7 miles. Maren Cole had counted them the night before on a paper map, because the phone she could no longer afford to keep on had stopped giving directions somewhere past the 4th, and now she counted them again in the rain. A sudden summer downpour that had come up off the river while the morning was still warm, so the water fell warm too, soaking through her one good blouse and running down the backs of her knees. 3 miles behind her. 4 still to go. The interview was at 9. Somewhere ahead, past the glass towers she could not yet see, a man she had never met was sitting dry in a car with a heater she would have called a small miracle, watching the street fill with weather, and she did not know yet that he would watch her too. She walked on the inside of the sidewalk, where the awnings gave a little shelter, and where they didn't she put her chin down and went anyway. The folder under her arm she'd wrapped twice in a grocery bag, her Ursum, 3 copies, the reference letter from the diner that had closed in April. She held it against her ribs like something breathing. 40 minutes, she told herself, because numbers were the one thing that never lied to her. 40 minutes, and you sit down, and you smile, and you do not mention the rain. A bus hissed past in the far lane. She did not look at it. She had the fare for one ride only, and she'd decided at 5 that morning, standing in the dark of the kitchenette so the light wouldn't wake Lily, that she would save it for the trip home, because if she got the job, she would want to ride home like a person who had a reason to, and if she didn't get it, she would need the dollar more than ever. That was the kind of arithmetic that ran her life now. Coffee or bus. Bus or the electric, the good blouse cleaned at the laundromat, or 2 more days of the meter on the phone. She had gotten very good at it. She told people she was fine at it, which was a different thing, and only Lily ever caught the difference, the way 6-year-olds catch everything you most want them not to. The rain doubled. It came down so hard the gutters jumped, and the warm asphalt threw up a smell of summer and tar, and something green from the planters, and for one block Maren let herself feel almost glad of it. Nobody could tell, in rain like this, whether your face was wet because the sky was falling, or because you were a grown woman walking 7 miles to beg for a job. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand and kept the count. 3.5. 3.5, and the towers came up out of the grey like a row of cold blue knives. The car was black, long, and so clean the rain seemed embarrassed to land on it. Inside it, where the world was 68 degrees and smelled of leather and cold espresso, Elias Wren was not looking at the 11 unread items his assistant had flagged urgent, was not looking at the contracts fanned on the seat, was not looking at the phone that had buzzed 4 times since the on-ramp. He was looking out the window, which he almost never did, because there was usually nothing on the other side of the glass that he had not already bought, sold, or declined to buy. "This is the 3rd light," he said. "It is, sir." Gus did not turn around. Gus had driven for the Wren family for 19 years and had long ago stopped pretending that traffic was something a man could be talked out of. "In my experience, the rain wins. It always wins. We sit, it falls, and eventually one of us gets bored and lets the other go first." He let a beat pass. "It is usually us." Elias almost answered that. He did not. He had a meeting at 9 that would decide whether 400 people kept their work through the winter, and a board that would rather he came to it dry and certain than late and human, and he had learned a long time ago that the surest way to be left alone was to want nothing visibly. So he wanted nothing, visibly, and watched the street. That was when he saw her. She was a block up, on the far side, moving against the weather the way a swimmer moves against a current. Not fast, not panicked, just refusing to stop. No umbrella. No coat. A pale blouse gone translucent with rain and plastered to her shoulders, a folder clutched to her side in a torn grocery bag, hair come loose from whatever she'd pinned it with, and stuck dark to her cheek. She was soaked to the bone, and she was walking like she had somewhere to be that mattered more than being soaked. "Gus." "Sir." "That woman. The one with the folder." Gus's eyes flicked to the mirror, then the window. I see her. She's not waiting for the bus. No, sir. The bus came. Gus paused. She let it go by. Elias frowned. People did not let buses go by in this. People crowded under awnings and watched the sky like it owed them money. They did not walk into it on purpose, holding something to their chest as if it were the only dry thing left in the world. He found, to his own faint irritation, that he could not look away from her. And Elias Wren had spent 15 years training himself to look away from things. Why would she do that? He said. It was not quite a question. Gus, who knew the difference between his employer's questions and his employer's thinking out loud, said nothing, and the light turned green, and the car slid forward through the wall of water and left her behind it. 4 miles. Maren passed the corner where the black car had sat at the light, and never noticed it, because by then she was watching the towers and doing the part of the arithmetic she hated most, the part where she let herself imagine getting the job. Wren Hospitality Group. Office and Event Coordinator, the listing had said. $41,000 a year, benefits after 90 days. She had read it 11 times. 41,000 was not a number, it was a country, a place where Lily had her own room with a window that opened, where the inhaler refills did not require a decision, where the word later stopped meaning no. Maren had filled out the application at the library on a Tuesday, and gotten the email 2 weeks after, and read it standing up in the laundromat, and had to sit down on the folding chair by the dryers because her legs forgot their job. 9 a.m. Friday. Ask for the 18th floor. A delivery truck took the corner too fast, and the wave came up off the gutter brown, and warm, and complete, and it hit her from the hip down, and she gasped. Not from cold. The rain was warm, but from the small total unfairness of it, the wet slap of it. The way the universe seemed to have a particular sense of humor about people who could least afford to be laughed at. She stopped. Just for a second. She stood on the streaming sidewalk with brown water in her shoes and looked down at her ruined skirt, and something in her chest pressed up hard against her throat, and she dug her thumbnail into the soft of her palm the way she did. Hard. A small private pain to set against the large public one. You will not, she said out loud. To nobody, to the rain. You will not, Maren Cole. You are 3 miles out and you have done harder than this. And she had. That was the thing nobody at the 18th floor would ever guess from the brown water in her shoes. She started walking again. She thought about Lily to keep her feet moving. Lily this morning, sleep warm and cross, hauled next door to Mrs. Okonkwo's in the dark with her backpack on backward. Why do you have to go so early? Lily had wanted to know, in the voice she used for genuine grievances, and Maren had crouched in the hall and fixed the backpack and said, because today I'm going to get us something good, and Lily had looked at her with that flat 6-year-old skepticism that saw straight through to the meter on the phone, and then had decided, generously, to believe her. Okay, she'd said, get the kind of good with a yard. And kissed her, sticky, and gone. Get the kind of good with a yard. Maren walked the 5th mile on that. The lobby of the Wren Tower was the temperature of a refrigerator and the color of money. Maren came through the revolving door and into it dripping, and the sound her shoes made on the white stone floor, a wet, slapping, undignified sound, seemed to travel up 40 floors and back down again. A security guard looked at her. A woman in heels carrying a coffee looked at her, and then, very carefully, did not look at her, which was worse. The reception desk was a slab of pale marble with a single white orchid on it, and a young man behind it, whose suit had never once in its life been rained on. His name tag said Devon. His expression said service entrance. Can I help you? Devon said, in the tone of a man who hoped he could not. Maren Cole. I have a 9 o'clock interview. Office coordinator. 18th floor. She was proud of how level it came out. She set the grocery bag down on the gorgeous marble, and a little puddle began immediately to form around it, and she watched Devon watch the puddle. Devon's eyes did the thing, the up and down, the price tag scan she knew by heart. You're here for an interview. At 9. Yes, Maren glanced at the clock above the elevators. 8:53. She had walked 7 miles, and she was 7 minutes early, and she could have wept with the math of it. "I know it's raining," she said, and then was furious at herself, because Rule 1 had been, "Do not mention the rain." "I can see that," Devon said. A beat passed. Behind her the orchid sat being perfect. Maren felt the water sliding off her hair and down her spine, felt the ruined skirt clinging, felt every degree of the cold lobby, finding every wet inch of her, and felt, underneath all of it, the old hot shame that had nothing to do with weather. The shame of needing this, of having walked to it, of standing on marble in brown shoes, asking to be let upstairs. She lifted her chin. "Could you let them know I'm here?" she said. "Please, I don't want to be late." Devon looked at her for one more second. Then he picked up the phone, turned slightly away, and murmured into it, and Maren caught the shape of the words, even if not all of them. "Someone here for the 9 o'clock. She's very wet. Yes, I don't know. Should I?" And the heat climbed her neck, and she dug her thumbnail into her palm again, and stared at the orchid and counted its petals, so she would not have to count anything worse. "Someone will be down," Devon said, hanging up. He slid a box of tissues across the marble toward her. Not unkindly, exactly, but the way you'd set food out for an animal you didn't want to touch. "You can—" "Here, thank you," Maren said, and took one, and it was instantly soaked through and useless, and she held it anyway because letting it go felt like giving him something. The elevator to the right opened with a sound like a held breath. Maren turned, ready to follow some assistant up to the 18th floor, ready to drip her way down a hallway of people who had never let a bus go by in their lives. It was not an assistant. It was the man from the car, though she didn't know that yet. She only knew that the lobby changed temperature again when he stepped out of it, that Devon straightened so fast he nearly knocked the orchid, that the woman with the coffee found somewhere urgent to be, that the security guard developed a sudden interest in his own shoes. The man was tall and dark-haired and dry, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit the way only ruinously expensive things fit, and he moved across the white floor like the floor had been poured for him personally. He was looking at the puddle around the grocery bag. Then he was looking at her. And Maren watched something cross his face. Fast. Almost gone before it arrived. But she had spent her whole life reading faces for what they were about to cost her. And she caught it. Recognition. Not of her name. Of her. He knew her from somewhere, and she had never in her life seen this man, and the wrongness of that put a cold finger on the back of her neck. "You walked," Elias Wren said. It was not a question. Maren's mouth went dry. "I'm sorry?" "From the river." "You were on Halstead, going north, at 8:15. He said it the way other people said the time of day, flatly, certainly, as a fact already filed. "You let the bus pass." The lobby seemed very quiet. Devon had stopped pretending to type. Maren felt the whole cold marble room tip a half-inch under her wet shoes, and she heard her own voice come out smaller than she wanted it. "How do you?" "My car was at the light on Halstead." He stopped a careful distance from her, not close, his eyes going once, fast, neutral, not the way Devon's had gone, over the ruined blouse, the brown hem, the grocery bag, bleeding water onto his stone. 3 lights. "You passed us at the second one. You're early." Yes, she could not find her feet. This was not how it went. The man at the top of the building did not come down to the lobby. He sent someone. He never knew you had walked. He only knew whether your shoes were wet when you sat down in his chair. "I'm Maren Cole. I have a 9 o'clock for the coordinator position." She fumbled the name from the email. A Ms. Allard. Miss Allard had a conflict. Something moved at the corner of his mouth that was not a smile. "I'm taking her 9 o'clock. Elias Wren. The name landed on her, like the gutter wave had. Total, warm, and impossible to step back from. Wren. As in the tower. As in the listing. As in 41,000 a year, and a yard for Lily, and the country she had walked 7 miles to ask permission to enter. She was standing in a puddle of her own, making in front of the man whose name was on the building, and her ursum was sodden, and her tissue was a wet pulp in her fist, and somewhere in the cold of the lobby a small high voice in her own head said, very clearly, "Well, so much for that." "Mr. Wren," she said. She put out her hand, because that was what you did, and then saw it was wet and started to pull it back. He took it anyway. His hand was dry and warm, and the grip was brief and exact, and he let go before she could decide what to do with it. And she understood, dimly, that he had done it on purpose, that a man who never knew about the bus had, for some reason, decided to shake a wet woman's hand in front of his own staff so that not one of them could find a reason to laugh. "You're dripping on my lobby," he said. "I know. I'm sorry." Rule 1. She had broken Rule 1 in the first 10 seconds, and now she was apologizing for the weather to the only man in the building, who already knew exactly how far she'd carried it. Don't apologize for water. He turned, the suit moving like dark water itself, and pressed the call button for the elevator he'd come down in. Devon, Mr. Wren. Devon was on his feet now. All of him. Towel from the gym floor. Hot tea, not coffee. Send it to the small conference room on 18, not my office. He said it without looking back, the way a man gives instructions to a tool he trusts. Then, to Maren, in the same flat voice, no warmer and no colder. "The interview's upstairs. You can drip there. It's my building." The doors opened. He held them with one hand and waited, and the whole frozen lobby watched the soaked woman and the dry billionaire, and could not, for the life of it, decide what it was seeing. Maren picked up her grocery bag. Water ran off it in a thin rope. She stepped past Devon, past the perfect orchid, into the held breath of the elevator, and the doors closed on her reflection. Hair wrecked, blouse ruined, chin, somehow, still up. "I want to be clear," she said, as the floor numbers began to climb, because if she was about to lose this, she would at least lose it standing straight. "I didn't walk, because I wanted you to see me do it." "I know," Elias said. He was watching the numbers too. 4, 5, 6. If you'd wanted me to see, you'd have stopped when the truck hit you. She turned her head. He was not looking at her. His jaw was set, and there was something behind the flatness of his face that she could not name yet. Something that had been sitting in a dry car all morning with everything money could buy, and had still not been able to look away from a woman in the rain. "You saw that too," she said. "I saw all of it. 11, 12, the number climbed. Most people stop." He said it almost to himself, and then, as if he'd given away something he had not meant to, the flatness came back down over it like a shade. "You didn't. I'd like to know why someone like that lets a bus go by." The doors opened on 18, grey carpet, glass walls, a city drowned and silver beyond them. Maren did not move yet. Her heart was going hard, and it was not the 7 miles. "Maybe," she said carefully. "I didn't have the fare for 2 rides, and I needed the second one more." For 1 full second Elias Wren went completely still, the way a man goes still when something he was sure he understood turns out to have a flaw underneath it he hadn't known was there. Then he stepped out onto the grey carpet and held the door. Again. And looked back at her with an expression she would spend the rest of the day trying to read. "Miss Cole," he said, "I think this is going to be a very different interview than the one you walked here for." And Maren Cole, soaked to the skin, 7 miles from the dark kitchenette, where her daughter had asked her for the kind of good with a yard, stepped out of the elevator onto the 18th floor, and knew, with the cold certainty of someone who had learned to read the exact weight of every turn her life took, that whatever happened in the next hour, she was not going to walk back out of this building the same woman who had walked into it. The small conference room on 18 had a glass wall that looked west over the river, and the river had gone the color of poured pewter, and the rain ran down the outside of the glass in long warping sheets, so that the whole drowned city seemed to be sliding slowly toward the floor. Maren sat with the towel around her shoulders, grey, thick, warm from wherever it had been kept, and smelling faintly of cedar and clean laundry, and she did not let herself sink into it the way her body wanted to. She kept her spine off the chair back. She set the grocery bag on the floor by her foot, where its slow weeping would do the least harm, and she folded her hands on the pale wood table, wet hands on dry wood, and waited. Elias Wren sat across from her, with no folder, no tablet, no pen. That unnerved her more than a stack of papers would have. People who interviewed you held something. It gave their hands a reason. His hands lay flat and still, and his eyes were on her face, and he had not yet said a single thing about the position. A young woman came in with a tray, tea in a heavy white pot, 2 cups, a small plate of shortbread nobody would touch, and set it down and poured without being asked, and left. And the door sighed shut behind her, and the smell of the tea rose up between them, bergamot and steam. And Merrin wrapped both hands around the cup, because the heat of it travelled straight up her arms and into the cold center of her. "Drink that," Elias said. "Then we'll start. I'm ready now. You're shaking." She looked down. Her hands were, a fine tremor running the surface of the tea so the steam shivered. She had not noticed. "That's just the cold," she said. "It passes. I'd rather start." Something moved behind his face, not amusement. She didn't think he had much of that, but a kind of narrowing attention, as though she'd answered a question he hadn't asked out loud. "All right," he said. "Tell me about the diner." It was not what she'd expected. She'd memorized answers for the other questions, the ones the internet promised they always asked. Greatest weakness. Where do you see yourself? Describe a conflict and how you resolved it. She had practiced them in the dark over the sink. Nobody had told her about the diner. "It closed in April," she said carefully. "The owner retired. It's on my. I read what's on your ursum. The paper's wet, but the ink held." He turned his cup a quarter turn on the wood and did not drink from it. "You were there 4 years. You started on the floor, and you left running the front of the house, the schedule, the ordering, the books when the bookkeeper's hours got cut. That's 4 jobs. The listing names one of them, and pays for half." He looked up. "Why did you apply down?" The question had a hook in it, and she felt the hook, and she made herself not flinch off it. "Because $41,000 in benefits after 90 days is more than I have ever made in my life," she said, "and because I can do the job in my sleep, which means I'll have something left over at the end of the day for the part that isn't the job." She stopped. That was more honest than she'd meant to be. The tea had loosened something. "I'd like that part back," she said. Quieter. "I haven't had it in a while." For a moment he said nothing. The rain pushed at the glass. Somewhere below them, an elevator chimed, faint, and a phone rang twice in an outer office, and was answered. "What's the part that isn't the job?" he said. "That's not on the ursum, Mr. Wren, no," he agreed. "Almost nothing real is." And he said it flatly, with no warmth she could point to, and yet she had the strange sensation of a door being held open a crack, not for her to go through, but for her to see that it was there. She drank the tea. It scalded going down, and she was glad of it. When she set the cup down, her hands were steadier, and she lifted her chin and said, "Ask me the ordering question. The one about reconciling a delivery against an invoice when the counts don't match. I'm good at that one." The corner of his mouth did the thing again. The thing that was not a smile. "Walk me through it," he said, and she did. She told him about the produce vendor who shorted them every 3rd Tuesday, and how she'd caught it by tracking weights instead of cases. About the meat order that came in priced wrong, and how she'd held the truck at the dock until the driver called his dispatch. About the morning the register was $40 light, and she'd found it not in the till but in a misrung discount 3 days back, and she watched him listen, really listen, the way nobody had listened to her about anything in longer than she wanted to count, and she understood that she had just done the best interview of her life, and that none of it was going to matter, because she could see in the perfect dryness of him and the perfect wetness of her that they came from 2 countries that did not share a border. That was when the door opened without a knock. The woman who came through it was somewhere in her 50s, and built like a closed ledger, narrow, exact, dressed in the kind of slate grey that costs more than colour. Her heels did not make the undignified sound Merrin's shoes had made. They made no sound at all. as though the floor had agreed in advance to be quiet for her. She had a tablet under one arm and a smile that arrived a half-second before her eyes did. "Elias, they told me you came down to the lobby yourself, and I said that couldn't be right, because in 11 years I've never once known you two." She saw Merrin. The smile held. Only the temperature behind it changed. "Oh, Renata." Elias did not stand. "This is Miss Cole. Miss Cole, Renata Sloane. She runs operations. She's the reason this building doesn't fall into the river on a Tuesday. You're too kind." Renata Sloane's gaze went over Merrin in a single smooth pass, the towel, the ruined blouse, the grocery bag bleeding its small flood into the carpet, and it was not Devon's scan, not the crude up and down of a price tag. It was gentler than that, and worse. It was the look of a woman taking inventory of a problem. "Miss Cole, forgive me. I didn't realize the 9 o'clock had arrived. I thought we'd moved it." "You moved it," Elias said. "I unmoved it. I see that." She set the tablet down on the table with a soft click, between them, like a card played. "May I borrow you for 90 seconds? There's a wrinkle with the Hartley account that won't wait, and I'd hate to keep Miss Cole sitting in wet things any longer than we have to." The concern in it was flawless. Merrin felt the cut of it land somewhere under her ribs, clean, almost painless, the way the deepest cuts are. "It can wait," Elias said. It really can't, and there was steel in it now, just a wire of it, showing for an instant under the silk. 2 minutes. In the hall. Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, in the unhurried way of a man who has never once had to rush toward anything, and said to Merrin, "Drink the rest of the tea. Eat the shortbread. It's better than it looks." "I'll be 90 seconds, and he followed Renata Sloane out, and the door did not quite latch behind them, and Merrin sat alone with the rain, and the cooling pot, and the low murmur of 2 voices on the other side of the gap. She did not mean to listen. She told herself that even as she heard the first words come through, even as her whole body went still, and tuned the way a body does when the next thing said is going to be about you, cannot be serious. "Renata." Low and fast. "Look at her, Elias. I don't mean unkindly. I mean operationally. She came in off the street looking like she swam here. Devon's already told 3 people. By lunch it's a story, the boss bringing strays up in the private car. She walked 7 miles in this." Elias's voice, flat, unmoved, for a $41,000 job. "What would you have done?" "I'd have rescheduled. Because I own an umbrella and a phone that works." The sound of the tablet being lifted. A finger moving across glass. "I pulled her file while you were playing Good Samaritan in the lobby." "There are gaps, Elias. The address is a transitional building. I know the block. The references are a diner that's gone, and a number that goes to a machine. She left the personal section thin. No emergency contact filled in. No." The voice dropped, and Merrin leaned despite herself, and caught it anyway. No dependents listed. Which, for a woman of her age applying to a job with benefits after 90, is either very tidy or very deliberate. People don't leave that blank by accident. They leave it blank when they think it'll cost them the room. Merrin's hand closed slowly around the warm cup. She had left it blank. She had sat at the library computer with the cursor blinking in the box that said dependents, and she had thought about Lily, about the inhaler, about the days Merrin had to leave at 3 for the pediatric clinic, about every manager she'd ever watched do the quiet arithmetic of a single mother and decide she was a liability before she'd lifted a tray, and she had moved the cursor past the box and left it empty, and told herself it wasn't a lie, it was just a thing she hadn't said. And now a woman she had met 90 seconds ago had read the shape of the empty box like a palm. "I don't care what she left blank," Elias said, and his voice had not risen, which somehow made it land harder. "I care whether she can do the work. I care whether the board thinks you've stopped hiring with your head." Silk again, smoothing back over the steel. "There's a candidate I've been bringing along. Pruitt's niece. You've met her. Yale. 2 internships. A recommendation from the Hartleys themselves, which by the way would help us enormously with the wrinkle I just invented to get you into this hallway. The role is essentially hers. It has been for a month. You posted the listing because legal makes us post the listing. Nobody expected the listing to walk in off Halstead. A breath. Let me take Miss Cole somewhere warm, give her cab fare and a kind word, and we both go to the 9:15 looking like the people we're supposed to be. There was a silence then, and into the silence the rain went on falling, and Maren sat very still in her towel, and looked at the orchid of steam rising off the cooling pot, and understood, with the cold, clean certainty she'd carried up 7 miles, that the job was already someone else's, had been someone else's for a month, and that she had walked through a summer storm to interview for a chair that had a name on it that was not hers. The old shame came up her neck, hot, and behind it, newer, harder, she almost didn't recognize it, came something with teeth. She stood up. She left the towel on the chair. She picked up her grocery bag, and she walked to the door, and she pulled it open the rest of the way, and the two of them turned to look at her in the grey hall. Elias, unreadable. Renata Sloane with her flawless smile, snapping back into place a half-second too late. Ms. Cole, we were just... I heard you, Maren said. Her voice came out level, which surprised her. She'd expected it to shake the way her hands had. Both of you. The walls are nice, but the door doesn't latch. She made herself look at Renata Sloane and not at Elias, because Elias was the one she wanted to look at, and that was exactly why she couldn't. You're right that I left the box blank. You're right about why. I've been told no by enough rooms to know which way the no comes from, and it usually comes from a box like that, before I've said one word about whether I can count a delivery. She drew a breath. The hall smelled of cold air conditioning and someone's coffee, and the wet wool of her own ruined blouse. But you got one thing wrong, and since you read my whole file, I'll fix it for free. Renata's eyebrow lifted. A precise 1/4 inch. By all means. The number that goes to a machine goes to a machine, because I turned the phone off on Tuesday to keep the lights on, and the lights matter more, because somebody small is afraid of the dark. She said it flatly, the way Elias said things, laying the fact on the table between them, where they all had to look at it. There's your blank box. There's your dependent. Her name's not your business, but you can stop wondering. I didn't hide her because I'm tidy. I hid her because of exactly this conversation, and I was right to, and that's the part that should bother you, and I don't think it will. The hall was quiet. Somewhere down the glass corridor a printer woke up and chattered and stopped. I'll get my own cab fare, Maren said, though she had no cab fare, though she had one bus ride saved in the bottom of her bag for the trip she had promised herself she'd take home like a person with a reason to. Thank you for the tea. It was good tea. And she turned to go, and her wet shoes made their slapping sound on the grey carpet, undignified, loud, and she made herself not hurry, because hurrying was the one thing she would not give them. Miss Cole, Elias's voice. She stopped. She did not turn around. The rain ran down the far glass. Tuesday, he said. You turned the phone off Tuesday. Today's Friday. A pause, and when he spoke again the flatness had a hairline crack in it she would not have heard 3 hours ago. 3 days. How would anyone reach you if something happened to her in 3 days? And there it was, the thing she had not let herself think about on any of the 7 miles, the thing she carried under everything else, the soft, terrible center of the arithmetic. She turned around. Elias Wren was looking at her, and Renata Sloane was looking at Elias, and the look on Renata's face had changed, just slightly, into something watchful and displeased, because she had seen something cross her employer's face that she did not like and could not bill to the Hartley account. Mrs. Okonkwo next door has the school's number, Maren said. And the school has the clinic. It's a chain. It holds. Her voice did the thing she'd been afraid of, finally, on the last word. Caught. Just once, and she pressed her thumbnail hard into her palm and steadied it. It has to hold. I don't have a spare phone, Mr. Wren. I don't have a spare anything. That's the whole reason I'm standing in your hallway dripping on the carpet of a job that's apparently been spoken for since before I read the listing. It hasn't, Elias said. Elias, Renata's voice, sharp now, the silk gone. It hasn't been spoken for, because I hadn't spoken. He was still looking only at Maren. Pruitt's niece can have the next one. There'll be a next one. There always is. This one came in off Halstead and reconciled a phantom $40 to a misrung discount 3 days back without a register in front of her, which is more than the Yale internship will do in its first year. He turned, at last, to Renata Sloane, and the flatness came back down over his face like a shade pulled in a bright window. Draw up the offer. Coordinator, 18th floor, the posted number. And add a line item to facilities while you're at it. Renata's jaw was very still. A line item. A phone. Company device, company plan. Issued day 1, not after 90 days. He said it the way he'd ordered the towel and the tea, without heat, as a fact arranged. If she's going to coordinate this office, I'd like to be able to reach her. And I'd like her to be able to reach the person who's afraid of the dark. That's an operational need, Renata. You'll have no trouble defending it to the board. For a long moment, Renata Sloane did not move. Then she picked her tablet up off. No, she'd left it on the table. She stepped past Maren into the conference room to retrieve it. And on her way back out, she paused. Close. Close enough that Maren caught the cold, expensive smell of her. Lily and something mineral. And she said, very low, very pleasant, in a voice pitched for one set of ears only. You handled that beautifully. Truly, the blank box, the small brave speech, he ate it up, and he doesn't eat much. The smile never wavered. I've watched a great many people walk into rooms in this building and try to become the kind of story Elias Wren can't look away from. The rain was a nice touch. Most of them have to manufacture theirs. She straightened. Welcome aboard, miss. Cole, we'll have so much to talk about. And she was gone down the glass corridor, soundless, the closed ledger of her, leaving the words behind her like a stain that would not lift. Maren stood in the hall and felt the accusation settle into her, slow and cold. You manufactured this. You walked on purpose. The same thing Elias himself had nearly thought in the car, in the lobby. You didn't walk so I'd see you. Except he had decided otherwise. And Renata Sloane had decided the worst. And Maren could not for the life of her tell which of them the rest of the building would believe. And she understood that from this morning forward, there would be a version of her walking these halls that she had not made and could not erase. The woman who'd staged a storm to land a billionaire's eye. Don't, Elias said. She looked at him. Whatever she said. Don't carry it home. He was watching her with that same unreadable steadiness, and she thought of the things she'd caught in the lobby. The recognition. The flicker. The way a man who had every dry thing money could buy had still not been able to look away from a woman in the rain. It was still there, behind the flatness, banked low. She wanted to ask him about it. She did not have the standing to ask him anything. You don't know what she said, Maren told him. I know, Renata. He almost, not smiled, but something. She'll have told you the truth in a way designed to ruin it. It's her gift. She told me once I hired people the way other men buy paintings, to fill a wall I was afraid to look at. She wasn't entirely wrong. That's what makes her dangerous. She's never entirely wrong. The honesty of it caught Maren off guard, that he would hand her that. A real thing. A soft place. 90 seconds after offering her a job and a phone and a salvaged morning. She did not know what to do with a man who kept holding doors open a crack like that. In her experience, the people with everything kept their doors shut hardest of all. Why did you really come down to the lobby? She said. It came out before she could stop it. You don't, Renata said. 11 years, and you never have. Why today? For the first time all morning, Elias Wren looked away from her. He looked out the long west window at the drowned Silver City, at the rain still coming down warm and relentless off the river, and something passed over his face that had nothing to do with her at all. Something old, turned inward. A door not held open this time, but standing shut with a man's whole weight against it. When he spoke, his voice had gone very quiet and very flat, and she knew the flatness now for what it was, which was the lid he kept on things. "Someone I knew used to walk in weather like this," he said. "A long time ago. Different city. She let the bus go by too, for the same reason you did, and I was too young to understand the arithmetic of it, and by the time I understood it he stopped. The lid came down. It doesn't matter. You reminded me. That's all. People don't usually remind me of anything. I find I don't enjoy it." He turned back from the window, and the unreadable steadiness was in place again, sealed, complete. "Go home, Miss Cole. Take the car. Gus will run you wherever you need to go, and he won't say a word about it, which is his entire genius." "I have bus fare," Marin said. "I saved it. I know you did." And there, for half a second, was almost the thing that was not a smile, gentler than before. Save it for something else. Let a man who watched you walk 7 miles do the one easy thing he's allowed to do. "The car's downstairs. The phone will be at your desk Monday." He moved past her toward the corridor, and then paused, the way he kept pausing, a man who left the most important sentence for the threshold. "And the box on the form. Fill it in Monday. Her name, the school, Mrs. Okonkwo, the clinic, the whole chain. So it holds with something stronger than a neighbor's good memory. That's not charity. That's operations. I told you, I'd like to be able to reach the people who work for me." Then he was gone down the glass hall, charcoal and certain, and Marin Cole stood alone on the 18th floor, with a job she'd walked 7 miles for, and a stain Renata Sloane had pressed into her and a half-told story about a someone who used to walk in the rain, and she did not feel the way she'd thought she would, like a woman who had won. She felt like a woman who had stepped through a door into a country she didn't have a map for, where the man at the top knew the exact weight of her mourning, and the woman who ran the building had already decided she was a lie, and where somewhere far below, in a dark kitchenette across 7 miles of wet city, a small girl who was afraid of the dark was waiting to be told whether today had turned out to be the kind of good with a yard. She picked up her grocery bag. The water had stopped running off it. There was nothing left in it to give. She walked to the elevator and pressed the button, and as the doors opened on that held breath sound, she caught her own reflection in the dark glass. Hair wrecked, blouse ruined, chin, somehow, still up and behind the reflection. Far down the grey corridor, she saw Renata Sloane standing in the door of her office, tablet in hand, watching the new hire leave. Not smiling now, simply watching. The way you watch a number you intend to balance later. The doors closed. The floor began to fall, and Marin, riding down through the cold heart of the Wren Tower toward the warm, flooded street and the long ride home she would not have to walk, found that her hands had started shaking again, and that it was not, this time, the cold. The phone came on Monday, exactly as he'd said it would. It was sitting at the corner of her new desk on the 18th floor when Marin arrived at 7:40, a small black rectangle in a box with her name on a label, and beside it a single line in a hand she didn't yet recognize but would learn, fill in the chain. E. W. She stood holding it for a moment in the cool hum of the office, with the morning sun already hard and white over the river and the air conditioning raising gooseflesh on arms that had been sweating on the walk from the bus stop, and she thought, this is the part where I wake up. She did not wake up. She turned the phone on, and the first thing she did with it, before email, before anything, was program 4 numbers into the box that said dependents, the school, the clinic, Mrs. Okonkwo, and last slowly, with her thumb hovering, Lily Cole, age 6. The chain held with something stronger than a neighbor's good memory. She sat down at the desk and let herself breathe. 3 weeks turned the strangeness ordinary, the way 3 weeks will. She learned the building, which elevator was fastest before 9, which conference room had the cold draft the staff had stopped fighting, where the good coffee hid 2 floors down in a kitchen nobody guarded. She learned the people. Devon, downstairs, had thawed by degrees into something almost like an ally, ever since the morning she'd caught a billing error that would have charged a client twice and routed the fix so it never touched his desk. Now he saved her the last of the cold brew on hot mornings and said Miss Cole like a small salute. She learned the work, which was the easy part, the part she could do in her sleep, just as she'd promised. By the end of the second week, she had reorganized the event calendar so the double booking stopped, found $4,000 of standing charges for a storage unit no one had opened since spring, and made the front desk run like the front of a house. Because that was what it was, she understood. Just a bigger house with colder marble. What she did not learn, what stayed a moving target, was Elias Wren. He came past her desk most mornings on the way to his office, charcoal and certain, and most mornings he said nothing. Only set a paper cup of tea. Not coffee. Tea, bergamot, the kind from that first day, at the corner of her desk without breaking stride, as if it were an item on a manifest he was obligated to deliver. The first time he did it, she'd said thank you, and he'd kept walking. The second time she'd said nothing, and neither had he. By the fifth, she understood it was not about the tea. It was the only sentence he had that didn't require words. He's never done that for anyone, Devon told her. Low, in the elevator. Awed. The tea thing. It's operations, Maren said, and surprised herself, because she'd meant it as a joke. The first one she'd made in this building. And it landed warm in her own chest like the tea did. Because that was his word. She'd started to notice it. Everything he did that a kinder man would have called kindness, Elias filed under operations. The ergonomic chair that appeared at her desk in week 2. Your back's going to cost me sick days, it's operations. The afternoon he overheard her on the company phone with the clinic, her voice gone tight over a refill that needed a doctor's signature the office wouldn't fax. And the next morning, the signature was simply there, handled. A problem dissolved. The pharmacy was being unreasonable. I find people are less unreasonable with me. It's operations. He laid each one down flat and walked away before she could look at it too closely. The way a man leaves a gift on a porch and rings no bell. You know, she said to him one Thursday, when he set the tea down and for once did not keep walking, for a man who runs a hospitality company, you have a strange definition of hospitality. You call it operations so nobody catches you being nice. Elias considered this. The white summer light came off the river behind him and put a hard edge on everything. Nice is inefficient, he said. Operations scales. And then, she almost missed it. It went by so fast, the corner of his mouth moved, and he added, perfectly flat. Also, if I'm nice and it gets out, my whole reputation collapses, and the stock takes it personally. It took her a full second. Then she laughed, a real one, surprised out of her, loud in the quiet office, and she saw something flicker across his face that was not the flatness, and not the thing that was not a smile, but something younger and briefly astonished. The look of a man who has just discovered, late in life, that he can make a sound like that happen on purpose. Was that a joke? She said. I don't joke. It's bad for operations. He picked up a folder off her desk that he did not need and walked away with it, and Maren sat there with the tea going cold in her hands, and her heart doing something foolish, and across the office, behind the glass wall of her own office, Renata Sloane stood with a tablet and watched the new hire laugh, and did not laugh, and made, on the glass surface under her thumb, one small precise note. The crisis came on the last Friday, in July, and it came the way crises always came in that building. Quietly, by phone, while everyone else was at lunch. The summer gala for the Hartley Foundation was 11 days out, 400 guests. The single most watched evening on the Wren hospitality calendar. The one the board used as a yardstick for whether the event's arm was worth keeping. And at 1:15 on a hammering hot afternoon, with the office half empty and the heat shivering off the avenue 40 floors down, the venue called to cancel. A burst pipe, the manager said. Water through 3 floors. The ballroom closed indefinitely. 11 days out. No room. 400 guests already confirmed, the Hartleys among them, and the Hartleys, Maren had learned, were the account that ran under everything Renata touched. Maren took the call, because Renata was at lunch and the events coordinator before her had left a desk and a password, and nothing else. She listened. She did not panic, because panic was a luxury, like a second bus ride. She took down the manager's number, the insurance contact, the 3 floors, the word indefinitely, and then she sat very still for 90 seconds with her eyes closed and ran the arithmetic, the only thing that had never lied to her, and when she opened her eyes, she started making calls. She was on the 4th one, standing now, the company phone hot against her ear, and her own desk phone pinned to the other shoulder, when Elias came out of his office. He'd heard something in the pitch of the room. He stopped at the edge of her desk and did not interrupt, only watched, hands still, the way he'd watched her in the conference room weeks ago when she told him about reconciling a phantom $40. No, I understand the date's locked. I'm not asking you to move the date. I'm asking what your atrium holds at a seated capacity if we pull the silent auction into the mezzanine instead, she was saying, fast and level, a legal pad filling with her cramped numbers. 4:20 with the auction up there. Yes. Hold it for me 1 hour, I'll have a deposit wired before you finish your coffee. She hung up the cell. She picked the desk phone back up. Devon, I need the Hartley confirmation list, and I need to know which 40 guests RSVP'd with mobility notes, because wherever we land has to seat them on the ground floor, today, before I sign anything. She covered the receiver, finally looked up, and found Elias standing there. Her face did a complicated thing. Caught, then steadied. The Whitlock Atrium, she said to him. Across the park. It's free that night because the symphony moved their fundraiser to September, which I only know because I tracked it last week when I was learning the competitor calendar. It holds 420 seated. It photographs better than the Hartley Ballroom ever did, and it's 19% cheaper. I can have it locked in an hour, and the invitations reissue tonight if the print vendor stays open, which he will, because I'm about to become his favorite client. The office had gone silent around them. Somewhere a printer chattered and stopped. Elias looked at the legal pad. He looked at the 2 phones. He looked at her. Do it, he said. I'll need a wire authorization over my signing limit. The deposit's $19,000. You have a signing limit? $5,000. Renata set it the first week. Something crossed his face. As of now, you don't. He reached over, took her pen, wet from her grip, and he didn't seem to notice or mind, and wrote a number and his initials on the corner of her legal pad. Wire it. If anyone asks who approved it, the answer is me. And the second question, why, has a 1-word answer. He set the pen down. Operations. And there it was. She felt it crack open in her chest. Helpless, the warmth, because he'd handed her his own word back as a gift, made it theirs, and she understood for the first time that the small flat thing he'd been doing for 3 weeks had been building toward exactly this, the moment he could stand in a crisis and let her solve it, and call the solving by their private name. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Fix my gala. He started to turn, then stopped, the way he always stopped, leaving the important sentence for the threshold. Miss Cole, Renata's going to come back from lunch and find the venue changed without her. She is not going to enjoy that. I know. I want you to do it anyway. He held her eyes. I'll handle Renata. You handle the 400 people. That's the division of labor. A beat, and the corner of his mouth again. It's operational. He went back into his office. Maren wired the deposit, and the Whitlock Atrium was theirs by 2:30, and by the time Renata Sloane's soundless heels came back down the corridor at 3, the gala had a new home across the park, a better one, and 40 guests with mobility notes had ground floor seating, and a print vendor across town was already running new invitations on cream stock, and the whole near catastrophe had been turned, in 90 minutes, into a story the building would tell as a triumph. Renata did not say anything to Maren about it. That was how Maren knew it had cost her something. That evening the office emptied early into the long gold heat of a Friday in summer, and Maren stayed, because there was nothing waiting at home but Mrs. Okonkwo's goodwill running thin, and a kitchenette that held the day's warmth like a closed fist, and because Lily was at a school friend's until 7 for the first sleepover invitation of her small life, which Maren had said yes to with a casual voice, and then cried about quietly in the supply closet, out of a joy she did not have a name for. So she stayed, and rebuilt the seating plan around the new atrium, and did not notice the light going amber, and then rose across the river, until a voice behind her said, "You're still here." Elias, jacket off, sleeves turned back, 2 paper cups of tea in his hands. He set one at the corner of her desk. "So are you," she said. "I own the building. I have an excuse." He didn't leave. He stood at the glass wall and looked west, where the sun was going down enormous and slow over the water, turning the whole drowned-by-morning city into something molten and forgiving. The rain of 3 weeks ago was a long way off. The heat had cooked the streets dry and golden. "You saved the gala," he said, not turning around. "I moved a party across a park. You saved 400 relationships and a year's worth of goodwill in 90 minutes, with a legal pad and 2 phones. He did turn then. The amber light was on his face, and it softened the flatness into something she hadn't seen before. "Renata's been running the events arm for 11 years. She's good. She'd have salvaged it too, but she'd have salvaged it in 3 days, by apology and discount, and you salvaged it in 90 minutes by making it better. There's a difference, and I noticed it, and so did she, which is the part you should brace for." Maren wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're about to inherit an enemy you didn't choose, and I'd rather you saw it coming than walked into it in the rain." He almost smiled at his own line. "There's the shortbread, by the way." He nodded at a small white plate he'd carried in and set on her desk without her noticing. The same biscuits from that first morning. "Better than it looks. You never ate it the first time. You were too busy being braver than the situation called for." She picked one up. It was buttery and salted, and exactly as good as he'd promised, and she made a small surprised sound, and he watched her make it with the same astonished young look he'd had when she laughed. "It's good," she admitted. "I know. I'm never wrong about shortbread. It's the one area of my life with a perfect record." He sat down, finally, across from her desk, the way he'd sat across the conference table, and for a while they didn't talk about the gala at all. He asked about Lily, by name, which startled her, because she'd never said the name to him. He'd read it in the box she filled in. He asked whether the sleepover was a good thing or a terrifying one, and seemed to genuinely want the distinction. She found herself telling him about the yard, the kind of good with a yard, the whole phrase, Lily's morning skepticism, the backpack on backward, and he listened the way he listened to everything, completely, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "When this gala lands," he said, "and it's going to land, there's a permanent role above coordinator. Director of events. It's Renata's to fill, and she'll fight it. But it's mine to decide." He turned the untouched cup a quarter turn on the desk. The old habit. It comes with a number that has a yard in it. A real one, with a window that opens. He said it without weight, almost carelessly, the way he laid down all his gifts, but his eyes weren't careless at all. "I'm not promising you anything. I'm telling you it exists, so that the next time Renata makes you feel like a stray she let in out of the rain, you'll have something true to set against it." The future tense sat in the air between them, spoken without flinching, a window that opens, and Maren felt the whole impossible shape of it. A life where Lily had a yard, where the arithmetic stopped, where she walked into this building as someone who belonged in it, and for 1 full minute, with the sun going down molten over the river, and the shortbread sweet on her tongue, and a man across the desk who called his kindness operations so no one would catch him at it. She let herself believe it. That was the high. She would think about it later, often, the exact height of it, because of how far it had to fall. The fall began the following Tuesday, and it began, like the crisis, with Renata Sloane choosing her moment. She came to Maren's desk at the end of the day, when the office had emptied, and Elias was across town at a dinner. Renata herself had scheduled to be sure he'd be across town. She came soundless, the closed ledger of her, and she set a manila folder on Maren's desk with the same soft click she'd set the tablet down with on the first morning. A card played. "Walk with me," she said. "There's something you should see before this goes any further. I find it's a kindness to show people the floor before they fall through it." Maren did not want to walk anywhere with her, but she stood because refusing felt like flinching, and she followed the silent heels down the dim glass corridor to the corner office she had never been inside, where the city stood lit and enormous in the windows, and the air smelled of lily and something mineral and cold. Renata closed the door. She did not sit. She opened the folder on the wide pale desk and turned it so it faced Maren, and inside was a single photograph. Old, the colors gone soft and warm with age. A photograph of a young woman on a city street in the rain. She was perhaps 20. She wore a thin pale blouse gone translucent with weather and plastered to her shoulders, and her dark hair had come loose and stuck to her cheek, and she was walking against the rain with her chin down, and something held to her chest, and she was soaked to the skin, and walking like she had somewhere to be that mattered more than being soaked. The floor went out from under Maren exactly the way Renata had promised it would. Her name was Cora, Renata said. Quiet. Almost gentle. Which was the worst of it. This was a long time ago. A different city. Before any of this. Before the money. Before the tower. When Elias Wren was nobody at all, and so was she. They were the same kind of poor. She used to walk everywhere in any weather, because the fare mattered more than the soaking. Does that arithmetic sound familiar? She let it sit. He couldn't reach her in time. Circumstance reached her first. She was gone before the spring, and Elias has spent 30 years and a very great deal of money building a fortress so high that nothing like that could ever happen near him again. And then, Renata tapped the photograph once, lightly, on the wet pale blouse. Then a woman walked 7 miles through a summer storm and let a bus go by, and stood dripping in his lobby holding everything she owned to her chest, and he came down to that lobby for the first time in 11 years. You asked him why once, I heard you. He didn't tell you, because he doesn't know how to. So I'm telling you. Maren's hand had gone cold around nothing. Stop, he doesn't see you, Miss Cole. The words were soft as falling ash, and they would not lift. He has never once seen you. He sees a chance to rewrite an afternoon 30 years ago that he has never forgiven himself for. The tea, the chair, the signature at the pharmacy, the shortbread, the window that opens, none of it is for Maren Cole. It's for Cora. You're not a person to him. You're a correction. She straightened, and the gentleness folded away, and underneath was the steel that had been there all along. I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because I watched it happen once before, 6 years ago. A different woman, a different rainstorm. And when he finally understood that she was herself and not the ghost, he couldn't look at her, and she left this building in pieces. I'd spare you that. You have a child. You can't afford to leave anywhere in pieces. The room was very quiet. The lit city stood in the windows and did not care. Why? Maren managed. Why are you really doing this? Because the gala is in 9 days, and I have run this company's events for 11 years, and I will not watch the board hand a director's title to a sentimental story Elias can't look away from. Flat, now, honest in the way that ruined the truth. And because, unlike him, I actually see you. I see a smart, exhausted woman who can do the work, and who deserves to be wanted for the work, and not for her resemblance to an afternoon in the rain. I'm offering you a way out that keeps your dignity and your daughter's. She slid a second sheet from the folder, a single-typed page, and turned it to face Maren. A transfer. The Denver office, regional events, a real title, a real raise, more than the director's number here, actually, and a relocation package that would put a yard under that child's window by autumn. Away from this, away from him, and the thing he thinks he's looking at when he looks at you. She set a pen on the page. It's a better job, Ms. Cole. It's only ugly because of why I'm offering it. Take the job. Leave the reason. And there at the bottom of the relocation figure, typed plain, was a phrase that stopped Merrin's breath cold. Relocation to include suitable family housing, fenced yard, and she understood, with a lurch, that Renata Sloane had learned Lily's exact private words, the kind of good with a yard, and had them typed into a contract, and that there was no corner of her life this woman had not already walked through in her soundless heels. You've been listening to me, Merrin said. All of it. I listen to everyone. It's my job. Renata did not blink. He calls it operations. I call it operations too. The difference is, I don't pretend it's love. She tapped the pen. You have, until the gala. After that, the offer closes. The title here goes through, and you become a story this building tells for years. The stray he brought up in the rain. The one who staged a storm to land a billionaire's eye. I didn't invent that version. I heard it in the lobby the first morning. But I can keep it from following you to Denver. Or I can let it follow you down this hall every day for the rest of your time here. Your choice. I'd choose the yard. Merrin did not take the pen. She did not take the photograph, though she wanted to put her hand over the soaked blouse and the loose dark hair and say something to a woman 30 years gone who had walked the same arithmetic she had. She left it all on the wide, pale desk. She walked to the door on her own 2 feet, and her shoes, dry now, made no sound at all, and she hated that they made no sound, because the slapping wet sound had at least been hers. I'll think about it, she said, which was not yes and was not no, and was the most honest thing she had. Do, said Renata Sloane, already turning back to the lit city. Thinking is the only thing in this building that's free. The bus home was hot and crowded and smelled of August and sunscreen and someone's takeout, and Merrin stood the whole way with her hand in the strap and her mind very far down a road she did not want to be on. She got off 2 stops early and walked the last of it through the cooling gold evening, just to feel the ground move under her, and she let herself into the apartment where Lily was back from the sleepover and high on her own bravery, full of a long, sticky story about a dog and a top bunk and a movie they'd watched twice, and Merrin sat on the edge of the narrow bed and listened to all of it, every word, and held her daughter's warm foot through the blanket, and did not cry, because the arithmetic of crying was that it woke a child who was finally, miraculously, not afraid of the dark in someone else's house. Mama, Lily said, drowsy, at the end of it. Did you get the good with the yard yet? And Merrin, who had 2 yards on offer now and could not tell which one was the trap, said, Almost, baby. Go to sleep, and sat there in the dark long after Lily's breathing went slow, and even, looking at the streetlight through the window that did not open, turning the manila folder over in her mind, the soaked blouse, the loose hair, the woman she had been hired to correct. She did not sleep much. By morning, she had decided one thing only, which was that she could not take a contract built on her daughter's private words without first standing in front of Elias Wren and finding out whether the whole of the last 3 weeks, the tea, the signature, the window that opens, had been for her or for a memory wearing her face. She owed Lily that much certainty before she signed Lily's future to anyone. She found him in the small conference room with the western glass, alone early, before the office filled, the same room where it had all started. The river was bright and ordinary in the morning sun. He had 2 cups of tea, and he was setting one at the place across from him as she came in, as if he'd known she'd come. And the casual sight of it, the tea, the habit, the care he called operations, broke something loose in her chest before she'd said a word. Cora, she said. She watched it land. She watched the flatness she'd learned to read go rigid, then bloodless, watched a door that had stood shut with a man's whole weight against it for 30 years take the blow square. He set the cup down very carefully, as though it had become breakable. Where did you hear that name? Does it matter? Her voice came level, which surprised her, the way it had surprised her in the hall on the first day. I've seen the photograph, the rain, the blouse, the bus she let go by. She made herself say the rest. I know why you came down to the lobby. I know what you saw walking up Halstead in the storm. And it wasn't me. It was never me. Was it? You said it yourself. The first morning, in the elevator, you knew me from somewhere, and we'd never met. I should have understood it then. Her thumb found the soft of her palm and pressed, hard, the old private pain against the large one. I just need you to tell me the truth, because I've got a contract on a desk with my daughter's words typed into it, and I can't sign her whole life to a man who looks at me and sees somebody he lost in the rain 30 years ago. So tell me, when you look at me, right now, this second, who's sitting in this chair? For a long moment, Elias Wren said nothing. The light came off the river and put a hard edge on everything, the way it always did. His hands lay flat and still on the pale wood, and his face had gone somewhere she couldn't follow, somewhere old, and turned all the way inward. And when at last he opened his mouth, what came out was not a denial, was not the clean, flat correction she had been praying for, was not for her at all. You walked the way she walked, he said quietly. The first thing I ever saw you do, you did exactly the way she did it. I sat in that car and I could not look away, and I didn't know why. And then I did know why, and I came down to the lobby anyway. He looked up, and his eyes were terrible and honest. So I can't tell you it wasn't her. The first morning, it was her. I'd be lying if I said otherwise, and I find I can't lie to you, which is its own. That's all I needed, Maren said, and stood, because she could feel the floor going, and she would not let him watch it go. Thank you for being honest. Renata said you couldn't be, and she was wrong, which I'll have to tell her, because she's never wrong, and it'll ruin her morning. It came out steady, and it cost her everything she had. I'm going to take the Denver job, Mr. Wren. It's a better title, and a real yard, and nobody out there has ever seen me in the rain. She picked up the tea he'd set across from her, because leaving it felt like cruelty, and she had no cruelty left, and she held it without drinking it. I hope you find some peace about her someday. I really do. But I can't be it. My daughter needs a mother somebody sees, and I've spent my whole life being looked straight through, and I'm not going to do it for a salary, even one with a window that opens. She set the cup down, full, untouched, and walked to the door, and her shoes made no sound on the grey carpet, and she had her hand on the cold steel of the handle when his voice came from behind her, low and cracked clean through the flatness at last. Miss Cole, the first morning it was her. A breath. It hasn't been her since the second one. Maren stood with her hand on the door and did not turn around, and out beyond the glass the river ran bright and indifferent, and somewhere 9 days away a gala was waiting, and somewhere across town a contract sat with her daughter's words in it, and she understood that whichever way she moved now there was no moving back to the morning before, and that she had exactly until the door opened to decide whether to believe the most dangerous sentence anyone had said to her in 30 years. She did not turn around. The handle was cold under her palm, colder than the room, and the river ran bright and ordinary beyond the glass, and behind her a man who had built a fortress 30 years high had just said the one sentence designed to bring a wall of it down. She made herself breathe before she spoke. That's easy to say to a door. It is. She heard the chair, the small sounds of him standing, but he did not come closer. Renata showed you the photograph because she knew it would do exactly this. She didn't lie to you. She arranged the truth so it would cut. That's her gift, I told you that. But she left a part out because she doesn't know the part. She wasn't in the car. Maren turned, then, only her head, only enough. And what was in the car? A man who saw a way of walking and thought it belonged to someone he'd failed. Elias stood with the morning on him, the flatness gone strange and open, like a surface cracked to show water underneath. That lasted 1 floor of the elevator. Then you said you'd saved the second fare because you needed it more, and Cora never said anything like that in her life, because Cora was 20 and certain the world owed her a soft landing, and you are not certain of anything except your own arithmetic. His voice did not rise. You stopped being her on the words, I needed the second one more. I've known it for 3 weeks, and I didn't tell you. Because I'm a coward about exactly one thing. And you're standing in the doorway of it. The printer in the outer office woke and chattered and stopped. Maren's thumb found the soft of her palm and did not press, this time. She let it rest there. Then prove it, she said. Not with a sentence. I've had sentences. I've had a contract full of sentences with my daughter's own words typed into it. Cora got to be a ghost. I have to be a mother somebody sees on a Tuesday with no rain in it. She opened the door the rest of the way, into the cool corridor and the ordinary hum of a building filling with its morning. You've got 9 days. So do I. I'll run your gala because I gave my word. And because 400 people don't care whose face you see when you look at me. After that I'll decide about Denver. Don't bring me tea between now and then. I won't be able to tell what it's for. She walked out before he could leave the important sentence for the threshold, because for once, she wanted the threshold to be hers. The 9 days went fast and hot. The city baked gold, and the river threw light up onto the glass all afternoon, and Maren built a gala out of legal pads and phone calls and a stubbornness that had carried her 7 miles once and could carry 400 guests across a park now. She did not let herself look at his office. She did not drink the tea that appeared anyway. Twice, at the corner of her desk, she carried both cups, untouched and cooling, to the kitchen 2 floors down and poured them out, and each time the bergamot rose up warm and accusing and she rinsed it down the steel sink and went back to work with her jaw set. It was the night before the gala that she saw the thing she was not meant to see. She had stayed past 10, alone on 18 with the cleaning crews far off vacuum droning, and the city strung out below in its hot August jewels, and she went looking for the final seating revision in Renata's outer office, because Renata had taken the master copy and not returned it. The corner office door stood open a hand's width. The lamp inside was the low gold one, not the overheads. Maren stopped. Renata Sloane stood at the window with her back to the door, and her heels, the soundless slate heels that the floor itself agreed to be quiet for, were off, set neat and parallel on the carpet beside her, and she stood in her stockinged feet with her weight shifted like a woman whose feet had hurt for 11 years, and only now, alone, admitted it. In her hand was the old photograph, the soft warm colors, the thin pale blouse, the loose dark hair. Renata held it the way Maren had wanted to hold it, both hands, careful, and her thumb moved once across the wet painted blouse of a young woman 30 years gone. Slow, the way you rub at a mark that will not come off the glass because it is on the inside. Renata did not know she was seen. Her shoulders, always squared, had come down. The lit city stood in front of her and did not care, and for once she stood in front of it the same way, just a narrow, tired figure in stocking feet holding a grief she had filed under operations for, longer than Maren had been alive. She lifted the photograph a little, into the lamp, as though to see it better, or to say something to it, and said nothing. Maren stepped back from the door. She set the seating chart down on the nearest desk, where Renata would find it in the morning, and she walked to the elevator on feet she kept quiet on purpose. And she rode down through the cooling tower, understanding something she had no words for yet. That the woman who had handed her a knife had been holding the same one in her own ribs for 30 years, and that a closed ledger is only a thing you build around a number you can't bear to total. The Whitlock atrium on the night of the gala was everything she had promised, and a degree more. 400 guests moved under a glass dome gone violet with the last of the long summer dusk, and the air smelled of lilies and warm bread and the particular clean cold of good champagne, and the silent auction glowed on the mezzanine exactly where she'd set it, and not one of the 40 guests with mobility notes had to ask twice for a path. Waiters moved like a tide she had timed. Somewhere, a quartet played low. Maren stood at the edge of it in a borrowed navy dress, her hair pinned the way it had refused to stay pinned in the rain. Her chin, somehow, still up, and watched the thing she had built hold its shape, and let herself feel, for one breath, the size of what her own 2 hands had done. "Enjoy it," Renata said, arriving soundless at her shoulder. You earned the breath. I mean that. You've never meant anything to me before. Why start tonight? Because after tonight I won't get the chance to be fair to you, and I'd like the record to show I tried once. Renata's smile was in place, but her eyes were on the crowd, on the Hartleys laughing under the dome, on the success of it. She had a flute she wasn't drinking. The Denver paper closes at midnight. I had legal hold it to the wire as a courtesy. The director's announcement is on Elias's card for the toast. He means to name you in front of the board and the Hartleys, and every camera in this room. Do you understand what that does to you? He'll have made you a story in public. The rain and the rescue and the girl from Halstead, and you will never again walk into a room in this industry as a woman who reconciled an invoice. You'll walk in as the thing he couldn't look away from. She turned, finally, and the steel was bare. Sign Denver. Tonight, let me take the card from his hand before he stands up. I am still trying to spare you, Ms. Cole, and I am running out of evening. Merrin looked at her for a long moment, at the squared shoulders that she had seen come down in a low gold lamp, at the photograph she would have bet was in the slim bag under Renata's arm right now, and she felt the old hot shame try to climb her neck, and she did not let it. You stood at your window last night holding her, Merrin said quietly. I saw you. Your shoes were off. You weren't protecting Elias from me. You were protecting yourself from watching it happen again. Whatever the it was, 6 years ago, the woman who left in pieces. She watched that land, watched the flute go very still in Renata's hand. You don't think I'm a liar. You think I'm a wound about to open in a man you've spent 11 years keeping shut, and you can't stand near an open wound. Because you've got one of your own you've never let anybody dress. She drew a breath of lily and bread and cold champagne. I'm not signing your contract, not because I trust him yet. Because I won't run from a room ever again to make somebody else's grief easier to carry. Excuse me. I have a quartet to cue. She walked into the crowd and left Renata Sloane standing alone at the edge of the bright dome, the flute untouched, the steel for once finding nothing to cut, and behind her she did not see, but she felt, the way you feel weather coming, the older woman go very quiet and not follow, retreating somewhere inside the closed ledger of herself to think. The toast came at 9. Elias rose at the head table into a hush, charcoal uncertain, a glass in his hand he had no intention of drinking from, and 400 faces turned up to him under the violet dome, and Merrin stood against the far pillar where she could watch the room and run it, and her heart did the foolish thing it had been doing for weeks. Most of you came tonight for the Hartley Foundation, Elias said, and you'll be glad to know the foundation doesn't need me to be charming. It needs your checkbooks, which my staff will relieve you of on the mezzanine with great efficiency. A warm ripple of laughter. The man who could not joke in June had learned the shape of a room. I'm told I'm supposed to use this moment to announce a promotion. There's a role, director of events, and a name everyone in my building expects me to say. Merrin's hands went cold around nothing. Across the dome she found Renata, still, watchful, the flute at last set down. I'm not going to say it, Elias said. The hush changed quality. Merrin felt the floor of the evening tilt. Because the woman I'd be naming reconciled a phantom $40 in her head the first hour I met her, salvaged this entire evening in 90 minutes with a legal pad while the rest of us were at lunch, and would, I think, never forgive me for handing her a title in a ballroom as though it were a favor instead of a fact she'd earned in private. He set the glass down, untouched, the old habit, and his eyes found Merrin against her pillar, and stayed there, level, in front of everyone, and did not flinch. So I'll do the operational thing instead. The role is filled. It was filled the afternoon she chose to make this gala better, instead of merely saved. The paperwork is on her desk, not on my card. Drink to the foundation, not to me. That's all the speech you're getting. He lifted nothing, and sat, and the room, bewildered and charmed, applauded the foundation. And Merrin stood against cold stone, with her whole chest gone loose and aching. Because he had taken the public story Renata warned her of, and quietly refused to tell it, had handed her the title where no camera could turn it into a fairy tale about the rain. She found him 20 minutes later, on the dim service balcony off the atrium's east side, alone, where the catering stairs came up gritty under the dome's polished skin, and the city stood out beyond the rail in its hot dark gold. He'd known she'd come. He always seemed to. There was no tea this time. There was nothing in his hands at all. "You didn't say my name," she said. "You told me to prove it without a sentence." He turned from the rail. "A title in front of 400 people is the loudest sentence I own. So I didn't spend it. I put the paper on your desk where it's just true, the way an invoice is true, and I let the room toast a charity instead of a story about a woman in the rain. A breath. That's the proof, Maren. Not that I see you, that I finally know the difference between seeing you and using you to forgive myself. Cora would have wanted the ballroom. You wanted the desk. I knew which one to give." The quartet came up faint through the floor. The grit of the service step was under her good shoe, and the night air smelled of warm stone and far-off river, and the green of the park across the way, and somewhere below a door opened and let out a breath of kitchen heat and lilies. "Tell me what happened to her," Maren said. "Not Renata's version. Yours. I can't stand next to a ghost I only know second-hand." He was quiet a moment. "We were the same kind of poor, in a colder city. She walked everywhere in any weather, the way you do, for the same arithmetic. One winter she got ill walking it, the kind of ill that catches the people who can't afford to stop, and I was working 2 jobs and certain I'd fix it next month, and the month came too late. The flatness held, but it was the lid on a thing, and she knew the lid now. I decided next month would never come for me again. I built all of this so I'd never have to choose between a fare and a person. And then a person walked 7 miles past my car, holding everything she owned to her chest, and I thought the past had come back to let me get it right." He looked at her, and it was terrible and clear. "It hadn't. The past doesn't come back. You weren't a second chance at her. You were a first chance at you, and I nearly missed it looking the wrong way down 30 years. And the woman 6 years ago. The one who left in pieces. There was no woman 6 years ago." A tired, almost smile. "Renata invented her to frighten you off. She's never entirely wrong, I told you that, but she's not above being entirely false in a good cause. The good cause was protecting me. She's protected me so long she's forgotten I might survive being reached." He shook his head once. "She'll have a hard night about it. She earned it." Maren let out a breath she'd been holding for 9 days. "Then say it plainly. Once. Because I've had enough subtext to last a life. When you look at me now. This second. Who's standing here?" "A woman who poured my tea down a sink for 9 days to keep herself honest," Elias said, "and ran my gala anyway, and won't sign her daughter's future to anybody's grief, including mine. Maren Cole. The arithmetic. The chin that won't go down. The one person in my building who calls me on my own word. The corner of his mouth, the thing that was not a smile, and then, astonishingly, the whole of it. The real one. There's no one in this chair but you. There hasn't been since the 2nd floor of the elevator. I'm only sorry it took me a fortune and 30 years to be able to say so to your face instead of the back of a door. She did not say I love you. He did not, either. He reached out and took her wet. No, dry now. Ordinary, hand the way he had on the first morning. Brief and exact, dignified, in front of no one, and let it go before either of them had to decide what to do with it. And that was the whole declaration, and it was enough, and the city burned gold beyond the rail. Renata found her at the coat check at midnight, when the dome had emptied, and the quartet had gone, and the caterers were folding the night into crates. She had the slim bag under her arm. She set something on the marble counter between them, with a soft click. A card played, and slid it across, and Maren looked down, and it was the photograph. Cora, 20, in the rain. "It was mine," Renata said. "I kept it. I was the one who found him, after. The cold city. The 2 jobs. I'm older than I let people think. I've been keeping that boy from breaking for 30 years and I got very good at it, and somewhere in there I forgot it wasn't a job. She did not smile now. There was nothing left to arrange. The Denver offer is withdrawn. I tore it up at 11. There's another paper in its place. She drew a second sheet and turned it, and it was the director appointment, the real one, with a number that had a yard in it, and at the bottom, in a narrow exact hand, one line added beneath the typed terms, recommended without reservation. R. Sloan, read the last line. I had to handwrite it. Legal wouldn't have let me type it without meaning it. Maren picked it up. The paper was cool and heavy. She read the line. Why? She said. Because you saw me at the window, and you didn't use it. Renata's voice was very even. You had a knife, and the standing to throw it, and you set it down. I've watched a great many people in that building, and I've never once watched anyone do that. Including me. She straightened, and the closed ledger of her was open now, just a tired, narrow woman in soundless shoes that had hurt for 11 years. I'm sorry, Ms. Cole, for the photograph, the contract, your daughter's words in my mouth. It was the cruelest thing I've done, and I did it gently, which is worse. I won't ask you to forgive it tonight. I'll only ask you to take the title and run my events better than I did, which you already have. She turned to go, soundless, and paused, the way they all did in that building, leaving the important thing for the threshold. He's better with you in the room. I've kept him from breaking for 30 years. You taught him in 3 weeks that he didn't need keeping. I should hate you for it. I find I'm only tired. Good night. She walked out into the warm dark, and her heels at last made a small sound on the lobby stone. A human sound, as if she'd stopped asking the floor to keep her secret. Maren took the car home that night, because Gus was waiting at the curb with the door already open and the heater off, and the windows down to the soft August air, and he didn't say a word the whole way. Which was, Elias had told her once, his entire genius. She rode through the cooling city holding the appointment letter and the photograph both, and she thought she would frame the photograph somewhere a young woman in the rain could be seen by people who'd understand the arithmetic of her. And she let the warm wind off the river move her ruined no longer hair. The yard came in September. The house was small, and the window in Lily's room opened with a crank that stuck, and there was a square of real grass behind it with a fence the color of weak tea. And on the first morning, Lily stood in the middle of it in bare feet in the wet cool of the new-cut summer's end lawn, and turned in a slow circle with her arms out, and said, Mama, this is the kind of good with a yard. And Maren sat on the back step with coffee she had not had to choose against a bus ride, and did not do the math on anything at all, for once, and let her eyes sting in the early light, and called it the dew. Elias came to dinner on a Sunday in October, when the heat had finally broken, and the first cool came up off the river, and he brought, instead of wine, a paper bag that turned out to be shortbread. And Lily, who was 6 and afraid of nothing in her own house, ate 3 pieces and pronounced them better than they look, which was the exact phrase. And Maren laughed so hard she had to put her cup down, and Elias watched her make the sound with the same young, astonished look he'd had the very first time. The look of a man learning, late, that he could cause such a thing on purpose. What, he said? Nothing. Operations. And he understood, and the corner of his mouth did the thing, and then the whole of it, and outside the window that opened a soft rain, began to come down warm and unhurried out of a low gold sky. The first since the morning she'd walked 7 miles into his life, and this time no one watched it from a dry car behind glass. This time the man who'd built a fortress so the rain could never reach him got up from the table and stood at the open door with the woman who'd walked through it, and her daughter, who was not afraid of the dark, and they let the warm summer's end weather come in over the sill and dampen the floor of a house that was theirs, and not one of them apologized for the water. And if you've walked your own 7 miles tonight, counting fares, counting hours, counting the small, cruel arithmetic of a life that asks too much, stay with us a while longer here at Platinum Diaries, where the underestimated are seen at last, and the good with a yard always comes. Subscribe, and let the next story carry you home.